One of the greatest lessons to learn from living abroad is actually learning about yourself, learning about the world around you, and how to deal with the daily stresses, because you will often be thrown in on the deep end on a daily basis. Roll that intro. Hello there, I'm Rafael de Furia. This week I wanted to talk about some of what it really comes down to when you are living abroad and experiencing life abroad as an expat. And yes, I will be using the term expat. If you are new to the channel and feel a certain type of way about the word expat, be sure to click up in the link up in the corner and you'll get an explanation of why I choose to use the word expat rather than something else. Basically, in short, I'm just using it as a shorthand for somebody living abroad without anything else attached to it. But as an expat, I do believe that it's important to understand who you are, where you are, and why you are the way that you are, and learning about how you deal with certain situations. This is something that we've definitely jumped into in Not Your Average Globetrotter before, but I would like to get into it in maybe a little bit of a different way and also share a little bit about some things that I've been through that I'm almost sure that in all these 290 episodes of Not Your Average Globetrotter that I don't think I've ever spoken about before. But I can say that for me personally, that living abroad these 14 years hasn't been something that's changed me. I'll say it's shaped me though. Definitely shaped me, who I am, and kind of the way that I go through life. But something that I will say is that, even though it's an unpopular opinion, is that I actually truly do not believe that people can change. Yes, people can express themselves differently, but I will believe that always at the person's core, that they will always be the same person, always and forever. But again, if they choose to express their inner core of who they are and not necessarily their personality, that ties into it. And it's not their core beliefs, because core beliefs can change. Those are things that can happen over time. That's a major difference that people can see in their lives. But in my personal opinion, people absolutely do not change. It's just the way that they express who their inner self is. And of course, this is just my personal opinion on life. If you disagree with that, you're more than welcome to let me know about that in the comment section below. But of course, who I am and what I've been through has shaped who I am, has molded me, and some of the high stress situations I've been in. And no, I'm not even talking about like having a stressful situation and having to tell off a boss about something that they did wrong, or how the work environment is absolute crap where we were. That's chump change. That's nothing. I'm talking about living in an area under rocket fire. That is something that I've briefly mentioned on Not Your Average Globetrotter before, but it's not something I've gone into a lot of detail about. But this is going to be a very extreme example here, and this is not going to be something where I should say, even for somebody who's moving abroad, they should start looking into how can they push themselves to the extreme. But sometimes you will be put into situations that you wouldn't normally find yourself in if you're living in a different part of the world. And it's funny that when you are dealing with certain situations that are stressful, you learn where your comfort zone is and maybe how far out beyond that you can go, or how much closer to you it actually really is. And maybe your comfort zone is a lot smaller than you thought it was. But once you go through certain situations enough times, you may also become calloused, or figuring out ways for yourself, almost as a self-defense mechanism, how to ignore certain things for better or for worse. But sometimes having those things, those calluses that build up, like a violin player, the more that the violin player plays their violin, they'll be able to get those sweet tones out of their fingertips because it doesn't hurt. The strings don't dig in as much into their fingertips anymore. If you've ever played any stringed instrument, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Got a few behind me. But one personal example was, this happened maybe 8 to 10 years ago. I don't remember exactly the dates, but I was living in an area that was under rocket fire, and there were things going on there. There were bombings. There were horrible things that I'm not going to get into. Even just saying these words on YouTube already may get this video demonetized. But unfortunately, this is just the reality that I did live in at one point. It had been almost a daily thing that it was either my area or other areas. And I'm not going to get into where in the world this was because it doesn't really matter. Also, I wasn't in the armed forces. It's just that the location of where this was is not important in my personal opinion. It's just that this was a very extreme situation. Whenever there was any kind of rocket fire that was close to my home, or even any explosions that were close by, you could sometimes feel the aftershocks after it. And every time that I would come back from the air raid shelter, the pictures in my house were all adjusted, so I had to readjust them back. It's the weirdest thing to see, that you walk into your home and you see that everything is just a little bit off. Things are just a little different. It's the strangest, most eerie feeling. But I'm very blessed and very grateful that even though there was danger around me, I was never personally in too much danger, even though I did know people who went through some very horrible things. I was just a regular guy living his life. Like I said, I wasn't in any kind of armed forces or anything. But one day, as per usual, I had been up the night before, working very late into the early hours of the morning. Went to sleep very late, probably, 4, 5, 6 in the morning. It was not that unusual, and it's still, unfortunately, not that unusual. But anyway, it was a bit later in the morning, probably around 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. I was in heaven, in bed, enjoying my beautiful, peaceful sleep, when all of a sudden, air raid sirens were going off. And I was so absolutely beyond exhausted at that point. I was so tired. I knew that I had a very short amount of time to be able to get dressed, run down into the basement where the air raid shelter was to get to safety. And at that point, I was just like, you know what? This has been happening so often. I am just going to take my chances, go back to sleep, and put it in God's hands if I'm going to wake up after. Because it's just when you go through certain situations that are so stressful so often, that after a certain amount of time, that it just becomes normal. And it's a horrible thing for something like that, to feel like somebody's norm. And it's not a good feeling, even if it is your norm, because you know that there's still always going to be a level of risk associated with not taking an action, or even sometimes taking an action could lead to a certain level of risk in your life. And like I said, in that moment, the place where my mind was if that was the time, then that was going to be the time. And I can say that all of these years later, that I am very grateful that I did wake up that day, or at least I think I woke up that day, unless this is some kind of purgatory, and that might explain some of the weird things going on in the world. And this is my own personal wonderful experience, but I'm going to go with the theory that this is not purgatory. And even though that was a very harsh extreme, this is what I'm talking about. There are going to be things in your life that you can go through that will just end up developing a thicker skin around you. Sometimes it's better to have a bit of resistance to certain things in life. But sometimes you also have to remember that you are human at the end of the day, and it is normal to have certain reactions, that you can't just not allow yourself to feel certain things. And so even in that apartment, after that day where I had been in bed, I just started saying, well, you know what? I'm going to go to one place in this hall in my apartment, because I know there's a few walls in between where I would be and the direction of where the rocket fire would be coming from, so that I knew I was taking a calculated risk that was unlikely for something to happen, but it was still a risk nonetheless, rather than just going down into an area that would have been much safer to be in. And that's what I'm going to say is, even though this is, again, truly a truly extreme case, that there are going to be moments when you are living in another country, even in your own country, but I think this really happens in a much more magnified way when you're living somewhere else, that you will be pushed past your comfort zone, because you will have no other option but to do so, because you're going to be thrown into a situation that may be so different from your own. And it's going to be during those moments that you can really understand your own resilience to certain things. That's what I was saying. During those stressful moments, not moments like the ones that I had, but moments like your own, I pray that you never go through anything like that. But in those moments where you can understand maybe more of who you are and how you can move through the world in a way that works for you. Because this is going to get into another point that I often see many expats complaining about where they are, that they say, oh, the people here are so this, or they're so that, or they're da, 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 da. But that's the thing, as an expat, you have the option to go back to a country that you come from, or you can go to another country. You can start nomading around. But when you are in a place that has a local population there already, this is going to be anywhere, except for maybe the middle of the desert. Although there are many deserts that people do call home, that have their original peoples that are from there. I'm going on a tangent here, but at the end of the day, this is the place where those people are from. If you see that there are certain things about the way of life that just truly don't agree with you, this is their home. This is their way of life. This is the way that their system works. And for you to come in and try to change that might not be the best idea. And you may find that people put up some resistance to your resilience. And so if you find yourself in a situation that is not healthy for you, that is toxic for you, then it is worthwhile considering how you can remove yourself from that place, whether it is a physical place or a mental place. And it doesn't matter where on earth that you're moving to, because you could be moving to Italy, you could be moving to Tanzania, Kyrgyzstan. It doesn't matter where you're going. And this is actually where I'm going to get into a little bit of a secret about Not Your Average Globetrotter. That may shock a few people, but probably not. And that is that even when I'm talking specifically about one country or another, let's talk about the two countries that I mostly focus on, and that is Italy and Portugal. If I'm talking about Italy, all of the core lessons there, in my opinion, are going to be relevant to what you can learn about living in Portugal or about Tanzania or about Kyrgyzstan or wherever it may be in the world. However, of course, there are going to be certain specific details that are only going to be relevant to one place about, like, for example, the videos that I've done walking around here in Braga, where the information about showing you a little shop on the corner, that's going to be very relevant to that one little corner there in this town. So that's not going to be necessarily relevant to another city like Porto or Lisboa. A lot of the core lessons, for lack of a better term, at the end of the day are the exact same. But while learning about myself, I do feel as though I've had the opportunity to be blessed to learn more about others, other cultures, other ways of living, other foods. That's one of my favorites. That's one of the tops right there. But joking aside, I do feel as though that I have gotten to be able to connect with other places and people both. And at the end of the day, something that is very important to remember is that people are people, that no matter where you go, no matter what the differences that you see on the outside or on the inside, or how people go about certain things or the beliefs that they have, at the end of the day, there are going to be certain core things that tie us all together, because we're all human. Other than maybe somebody like Zuckerberg. I think the jury's out on that one. I'm still not convinced that he's not Commander Data in some kind of costume, but that is another subject for another day. But jokes aside, of course, it is very important to figure out also sometimes when you are living abroad, when you are an expat, what are going to be the things that are different, to recognize those and figure out what they are so that you can go and start searching for the commonalities, because you don't want to get hooked on the differences. Once you find the commonalities, that is going to be something that, for lack of a less fluffy way of putting it, is going to help you build bridges and start closing gaps between things. Because once you can start doing that, that's going to help you connect better to where you are and the people around you. Once you can start doing that, that of course is going to be something that helps you to be able to properly set down roots in your area. And that's, again, getting back to what I was talking about with some people coming to a place, complaining about it, and just really saying the worst things about the people that are from there, or saying the worst things about their experiences there that might not be the average experience of most people around them. And the thing that I've noticed, and I'm not going to say the rule, but a generalization, is that a lot of people who don't properly integrate or connect with where they are going to also be a lot of the people who will have a lot of complaints about the area that they're from. And again, if you don't like it, you can always go back to your home country. And I'm not saying this in any kind of mean way, but you sometimes have to look at something objectively and understand if it is the right thing or the wrong thing for you. But when you have the ability to take away your perception of the people around you as the others, the group, the whatever it may be, insert demonym here, then once you can figure out that these are going to be people who are also living their lives and how you can connect with them, that will help you also to not just say the X group or the Y group or the Z group and all of their problems because of all the things they do and this, that, and the other. And at the same time, there are harsh realities that you may have to face, that you may find that there are certain things about a culture, society, or location, or anything beyond that. Again, the food can come into this and can play a major role. That one of those things may be completely against that core of who you are. That may be something that will hold you back from being able to enjoy life in a way that you can feel at your best. And it's at those moments where also realizing that you do have an option to make another option, make another selection, make another choice with the place that you might call home. And this is also something that I would say can very often, with a few tweaks, go for people who are in the country where they're from. That when you figure out how you can take steps to remove certain stresses from your life, that is going to make a huge impact on your day-to-day experience. Of course, sometimes there are certain stresses that we just can't remove, that are just inherent to what we're living through. But there are often steps that people can take in their lives, not always, but very often, that it will be possible to make those changes. It's just trying to do your best to figure out and push forward in the best way that you can. Taking that active role in your life is extremely important. And even to get to the point where you can say that, hey, is this thing that's stressing me out really worthwhile? Is it really worth my time? Is it really worth my energy? If you hate something, if you dislike something, are those feelings actually truly worthwhile having? Is it just removing energy that you could be putting into something else? Is having a hatred for something? I personally have the opinion that I don't want to hate anything. I don't hate things because it is a waste of my time. It is a waste of my energy. I could be taking that thought and using that space in my head for something that's actually going to maybe improve my life. And even if I am worrying about something, even if I am in a very stressful situation and I can get to a certain point for myself where I can say, hey, maybe sulking and really bringing on all of these feelings and allowing myself to really get deep into it, it might not be worth it. And so what can I do for myself to try to lift myself out of this? I think that's a really important thing in life to be able to do, regardless of where you are and regardless of what the situation is, if you're finding yourself in that. So this gets back to what I said at the very beginning of the episode, that when living abroad, one of the things that will be one of the biggest lessons that you can learn is about yourself, the world around you, and how to deal with your daily stresses that will come and surround your situation. And especially living on the other side of the world when you are thrown in on the deep end of another culture. Anyway, this is where I'm going to wrap up this episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. So thank you so much for joining me again. And of course, if you agree with anything that I said, or if you disagree with anything that I said in this episode, I'm definitely open to some discussion, because if I'm wrong about something, I have no problem to admit it. And if that gets me to a better place in my life and to get to the better thing, let's do it. I'm all for it. But again, really, thank you all so much to those of you who help support this show through sharing, through liking, through commenting, through taking an active role in this Not Your Average Globetrotter little world that's around this YouTube channel and the audio podcast, as well as my Instagram and everything. And I've seen that there are some of you who have actually become friends through this content and have gotten in contact with each other on other social media. So anyway, I'm not going to get into that, but of course also, especially a thank you to those of you who help to make these episodes possible, the rafaeldefuria.com/support, as well as the thanks button here on YouTube for that one-time support, as well as the monthly support through Patreon. Thank you really also very much for helping this project to be able to keep pushing forward. Of course, as always, I'm Rafael de Furia. Stay safe and healthy out there, and I will see you all next time for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Later.